The rain hammered against the windows of the dimly lit bar in Lower Manhattan, creating a rhythmic backdrop to my racing thoughts. I sat hunched over my third gin and tonic, my fingers trembling as they gripped the cold glass. 23 years old, and I felt like my life was already over before it had truly begun. In 72 hours, I would become Mrs. Vincent Rossi, a title that felt more like a death sentence than a new beginning. My name is Brianna Hayes, and I never imagined I would find myself in this situation. 6 months ago, my father's construction company went bankrupt after a series of bad investments, and what I later learned were sabotaged contracts. The debt collectors came knocking, threatening to take everything. Our family home in Queens, my younger sister's college fund, even my mother's small catering business that she had built from nothing. That's when Vincent Rossi appeared, like a wolf dressed in an expensive suit, offering salvation with strings attached. Strings that would bind me to him forever. Vincent promised to pay off every cent of my family's debt, to restore my father's reputation in the construction industry, and to ensure my sister could finish her education at Columbia. All he wanted in return was me, a wife, a trophy to display at his business functions, a warm body to legitimize his respectable businessman facade while God knows what he did behind closed doors. My parents, desperate and defeated, had already agreed. The engagement announcement went out before I even had a chance to protest. I had tried everything to escape this fate. I looked into legal options, but the contracts my father signed were ironclad. I considered running away, but Vincent made it clear that if I disappeared, the deal was off and my family would lose everything. I even attempted to find dirt on Vincent, something that would make him break the engagement himself, but the man was careful. Too careful. His public persona was spotless. A successful import-export businessman, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. But I had seen glimpses of the real Vincent during our brief supervised courtship. The way his eyes turned cold when he thought no one was watching. The bruises I noticed on his assistant's wrist. The fear in the eyes of his staff members. Tonight was supposed to be my bachelorette party, a small affair organized by my cousin Sophia. But I had slipped away from the noisy club in Tribeca, unable to pretend for one more second that I was a happy bride-to-be. Instead, I found myself in this quiet bar, nursing my drinks and contemplating the impossible. The bartender, an older woman with kind eyes, had stopped asking if I was okay after the second drink. She could probably sense I wasn't in the mood for small talk. The bar was nearly empty at this late hour on a Tuesday night. A couple sat in a dark corner booth, wrapped up in each other. An older man read a newspaper at the far end of the bar. And then there was him, the man who had caught my attention the moment I walked in, though I had been too lost in my misery to really notice until now. He sat 3 stools away from me, nursing what looked like expensive whiskey, his posture radiating a kind of controlled power that should have warned me away. He was tall, I could tell even though he was seated, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark suit jacket perfectly. His hair was black, slightly longer than conventional business style, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, straight nose, lips that looked like they rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that truly captured me when he finally turned his head in my direction. Gray, like storm clouds, with an intensity that made my breath catch. Rough night? His voice was deep, smooth, with an edge that suggested he was no stranger to difficult situations himself. I let out a bitter laugh. You could say that. More like a rough life, actually. The alcohol had loosened my tongue, lowered my inhibitions. Normally, I would never talk to a stranger in a bar, especially not a man who radiated danger the way this one did. But what did it matter now? In 3 days, I would be Vincent's property anyway. He shifted, moving 1 stool closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Expensive, with notes of cedar and something darker, more primal. "Want to talk about it?" His gray eyes studied me with an intelligence that made me feel like he could see right through my defenses. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the fact that this stranger would never see me again after tonight, would never know if I went through with the marriage or threw myself off the Brooklyn Bridge instead. Whatever the reason, the words started pouring out of me like a confession, like a dam breaking after holding back floodwaters for too long. "I'm supposed to get married in 3 days," I began, my voice shaking. "To a man I barely know, a man I don't love, a man who terrifies me if I'm being honest." I took another sip of my drink, the gin burning down my throat. "But I can't say no. If I do, my family loses everything. My father will be ruined. My sister will have to drop out of college. My mother's business will be seized. It's all tied up in contracts and agreements that I didn't sign, but that bind me anyway because I'm the price for my family's salvation." The stranger listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I paused to take a breath, he signaled to the bartender to bring us both fresh drinks. "Go on," he said simply, and somehow those 2 words gave me permission to continue. "Vincent Rossi," I said the name like a curse. "That's who I'm supposed to marry. Everyone says I'm lucky. He's successful, wealthy, handsome in that polished way. But there's something wrong with him, something cruel underneath all that charm. I can feel it." I turned to look directly at the stranger, emboldened by desperation and gin. "I've thought about running, just disappearing. But he would find me. And even if he didn't, my family would pay the price for my cowardice." I watched for a reaction, expecting pity or discomfort or maybe even disbelief. What I got was something else entirely. The stranger's expression had shifted subtly. His jaw had tightened. His eyes had gone from curious to calculating. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Vincent Rossi, you're sure that's who you're marrying?" "Unfortunately, yes," I confirmed, not understanding why he seemed so focused on that detail. "Do you know him?" A ghost of a smile played at his lips, but there was no warmth in it. "You could say that. We're acquainted." He took a long sip of his whiskey, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. "Tell me something, Brianna. If you could escape this marriage, what would you do? Where would you go?" I blinked, surprised that he remembered my name. I must have introduced myself at some point, though I couldn't recall when. "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't let myself think that far ahead because it's impossible. The contracts are binding. My family needs the money. And Vincent doesn't strike me as the type of man who accepts rejection gracefully." The stranger set down his glass with deliberate care. "What if I told you there might be a way out? A way that wouldn't destroy your family?" My heart began to pound faster. "I'd say you were either lying or insane. There's no way out. I've looked at every angle." "Not every angle," he said. His gray eyes locked on mine. "You see, Brianna? Vincent isn't quite the man you think he is. And neither am I." He leaned closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm going to help you get out of this marriage, but first you need to trust me. Can you do that?" I should have said no. I should have run out of that bar and never looked back. Everything about this man screamed danger, from his predatory grace to the calculated way he moved and spoke. But I was drowning, and he was offering me a lifeline, no matter how frayed it might be. "Why would you help me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. I'm nobody." He reached out and brushed a strand of wet hair from my face, his fingers warm against my skin. The gesture was intimate, too familiar for strangers, but I didn't pull away. "Let's just say I have my reasons. Reasons that have nothing to do with charity." His hand dropped back to his glass. "You have 2 choices, Brianna. You can walk out of here right now, go back to your bachelorette party, and marry Vincent Rossi in 3 days. Or you can come with me, and I'll show you a way out of this nightmare. But I need your answer now." I stared at him, at this dangerous stranger who somehow knew Vincent, who spoke with the confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. Every rational thought in my head was screaming at me to refuse, to go home, to accept my fate. But desperation makes people do irrational things. And sitting in that bar, with rain pounding against the windows and my future closing in around me like a prison, I made the most reckless decision of my life. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll come with you. I'll trust you." I met his gray eyes directly. "But I need to know one thing first. What's your name?" The stranger's smile widened, and for the first time, I saw genuine amusement flash across his features. He stood, offering me his hand, and I noticed how tall he really was, easily over 6 feet. When I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine with a possessive warmth. "My name is Blake," he said, pulling me to my feet. "Blake Rossi. And the man you're supposed to marry? That's my younger brother." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Vincent's brother. I had just poured out my heart to Vincent's brother. I had practically begged him to help me escape a marriage to his own family member. Horror, embarrassment, and a strange thrill of fear washed over me simultaneously. I tried to pull my hand back, but Blake held firm, his grip not painful but unyielding. "Don't panic," he said, his voice low and commanding. "This is a good thing, Brianna. Trust me. My relationship with Vincent is complicated. Let's just say I have reasons of my own for wanting to prevent this marriage." His thumb traced a circle on the back of my hand, a gesture that was both comforting and possessive. "Now, come with me. We have a lot to discuss, and not a lot of time. Your bachelorette party is probably wondering where you went." Blake led me out into the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, his hand never leaving the small of my back. A black car pulled up within seconds, as if it had been waiting, and a driver stepped out to open the door without a word. The efficiency of it all suggested this wasn't the first time Blake had made a quick exit from a situation. I slid into the leather interior, my wet clothes already soaking into the expensive upholstery. Blake followed, the door closing behind us with a solid thunk that felt like sealing me into a new chapter of my life. As the car pulled into traffic, I finally found my voice. "You're Vincent's brother. You're actually Vincent's brother." I couldn't stop repeating it, my mind struggling to process this revelation. "Why didn't you stop me? Why did you let me say all those things about him?" Blake poured 2 glasses of what looked like very expensive scotch from a built-in bar in the car. He handed me one, and I took it automatically, my hand still shaking. "Because I wanted to hear the truth. Vincent has always been good at presenting a certain image to the family. It's valuable to hear how he appears to the woman he's planning to marry." "Has always been?" I seized on his words. "So you know what he's really like." Blake's expression darkened, the dim interior light of the car casting shadows across his sharp features. "Vincent and I have never seen eye to eye. We have different philosophies about how to conduct business and how to treat people. Our father favored him, groomed him for a certain role in the family enterprise. But I've always had concerns about my brother's methods and his character. There was something carefully diplomatic about the way he phrased it, like he was choosing his words with precision." "What kind of business are we talking about?" I asked, though part of me already suspected I didn't want to know the answer. Blake took a long sip of his scotch, studying me over the rim of the glass. "How much do you know about the Rossi family, Brianna?" "Just what Vincent told me. Import-export business, real estate investments, legitimate enterprises." But even as I said it, I heard the doubt in my own voice. "Technically true," Blake acknowledged. "We do have legitimate businesses. but the Rossi family has been involved in what some might call alternative enterprises for 3 generations. My grandfather started it all during Prohibition. My father expanded the operation. And now. He paused, his gray eyes assessing whether I could handle the truth. Now I run things. Not Vincent, me. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You're saying, you're in the Mafia, the actual Mafia. Such an outdated term, Blake said, his lips quirking in amusement. We prefer to think of ourselves as a family business with diverse interests. But yes, essentially, that's what I'm saying. I'm the head of the Rossi family in everything but name. Vincent handles our public-facing legitimate operations, which he resents because he wants my position. He's always wanted it. I should have demanded the driver let me out immediately. I should have thrown myself from the moving car if necessary. Instead, I found myself asking, if you're in charge, why does Vincent want to marry me? What does my family's debt have to do with any of this? That's a very good question, Blake said approvingly, and one I've been trying to answer myself. Your father's construction company is small, barely worth Vincent's attention. The debt he took on wasn't substantial by our standards, which means Vincent has other reasons for forcing this marriage, reasons he hasn't shared with me or the family council. The car turned onto a quieter street, the rain still hammering against the windows. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything Blake was telling me. So you're saying this whole thing, my family's financial troubles, Vincent's sudden offer to help, it was all calculated? He orchestrated it? I don't know yet, Blake admitted, but I intend to find out. And that's where you come in, Brianna. You're going to help me understand what my brother is really planning. And in exchange, I'm going to get you out of this marriage and make sure your family stays safe and solvent. Why? I demanded, my fear giving way to frustration. Why would you do that? What's in it for you besides causing problems with your own brother? Blake leaned forward, his presence overwhelming in the confined space of the car. Because Vincent has been making moves lately, forming alliances without my approval, conducting business that puts our entire family at risk. This marriage of his is part of something bigger, and I need to know what. Plus, his voice dropped lower, more intimate. I don't approve of forced marriages. Call it a personal principle. The car pulled up to a tall building in Midtown, one of those sleek glass towers that housed expensive condos and penthouses. The driver opened the door, and Blake stepped out, offering me his hand again. I hesitated, knowing that if I took it, if I followed him inside, I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Where are we? I asked. My home, Blake replied simply. You'll stay here tonight, maybe longer, depending on how quickly we can work out a solution to your situation. You can't go back to your apartment. Vincent probably has people watching it. And you definitely can't return to your family's house. But my cousin Sophia, the bachelorette party, they'll worry. They'll call Vincent. Panic started to rise in my chest as the reality of what I was doing began to sink in. I'll handle it, Blake assured me, his voice calm and authoritative in a way that suggested he was used to handling crises. We'll say you weren't feeling well, that a friend took you home to sleep it off. No one will question it. Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next steps. I looked up at the building, its windows gleaming in the rain, each one probably worth more than my family's house. Then I looked at Blake, at this dangerous man who claimed he wanted to help me, who had his own reasons for interfering with his brother's plans. Every instinct told me I was making a terrible mistake. But what was my alternative? Go back to Vincent? Walk into that marriage with my eyes wide open to what he might be? I took Blake's hand and let him lead me inside. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of place where doormen wore uniforms and knew better than to ask questions. Blake nodded to the security guard, who nodded back with the respect reserved for someone important, someone powerful. We took a private elevator that required a key card, and I watched the numbers climb. 20, 30, 40 floors up. Penthouse, I observed, my voice sounding small in the elevator's quiet. I like my privacy, Blake replied, and my view. When the elevator doors opened directly into his apartment, I understood what he meant. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Manhattan skyline. Even through the rain, the city sparkled like a jeweled tapestry. The apartment itself was decorated in dark, masculine tones, charcoal grays, deep blacks, rich wood. Modern furniture that looked like it cost more than my college tuition. Art on the walls that I suspected was original, not prints. It's beautiful, I said, because I had to say something to fill the silence. Blake shrugged off his wet jacket, revealing the white shirt underneath that clung to his muscular frame. It serves its purpose. Are you hungry? I can have food brought up. I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch, too anxious about the bachelorette party to keep anything down. Maybe something light, I admitted. Blake pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. When he finished, he gestured for me to follow him deeper into the apartment. The food will be here in 30 minutes. In the meantime, you should get out of those wet clothes. I'll show you to the guest room. He led me down a hallway to a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom. The bed looked like it could sleep 4 people comfortably, covered in crisp white linens. There should be clothes in the closet that might fit you, Blake said. I keep things on hand for guests. I wanted to ask what kind of guests required a full wardrobe in various sizes, but I bit my tongue. It wasn't my business. Blake moved to leave, then paused in the doorway. Brianna, I need you to understand something. Once you're under my protection, that means Vincent can't touch you without consequences. It also means you need to follow my instructions. This situation is more dangerous than you realize. I'm beginning to understand that, I said quietly. But I need you to understand something too. I'm not a helpless victim. I'm desperate, yes, but I'm not stupid. If you're using me to get to Vincent, to play some kind of family power game, I need to know. Blake's expression shifted, something that might have been respect flickering in those gray eyes. Fair enough. Yes, this situation benefits me. I get intelligence on my brother's activities, and I potentially prevent him from acquiring whatever leverage he thinks marrying you will give him. But make no mistake, Brianna, I meant what I said in the bar. I don't approve of forced marriages. I don't approve of men who use fear to control women. And I especially don't approve of my brother's recent behavior. He stepped closer, and I found myself backed against the bed, my heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Blake reached out and tucked a strand of my wet hair behind my ear, the gesture oddly gentle from such a dangerous man. You're safe here. That's not a lie. Whatever else happens, whatever games are being played, you are under my protection now. Do you understand? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Blake's proximity was doing strange things to my pulse. He was nothing like Vincent. Where Vincent's touch made my skin crawl, Blake's made it burn. Where Vincent's attention felt predatory, Blake's felt consuming, intense, but somehow less threatening. Or maybe that was just what I wanted to believe. Get changed, Blake said, his voice slightly rougher. Dry off. We'll eat, and then we'll talk strategy. Tomorrow, I'll start making inquiries about what Vincent is really up to. In the meantime, you're not to contact anyone from your family or your friends. No social media, no phone calls. As far as the world is concerned, you're sleeping off too much champagne. Can you do that? I don't have much choice, do I? I asked, though without real bitterness. Blake's hand dropped from my hair to my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. You always have a choice, Brianna. You could walk out that door right now. I'd let you go. but I don't think you will. I think you're brave enough to see this through, to fight for your freedom instead of accepting a cage just because it's comfortable." His words struck something deep inside me, and I felt tears prick at my eyes. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Good," Blake said. "Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it paralyze you." He released my chin and stepped back, putting professional distance between us. 30 minutes. Then we'll eat and plan. After he left, I stood in the middle of that expensive guest room for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. I had gone from a desperate woman in a bar to a guest, or possibly a prisoner, in a mafia boss's penthouse. I had traded one dangerous man for another. Though Blake seemed like a different kind of danger than Vincent, I stripped off my wet clothes and found a robe in the bathroom, wrapping myself in its warmth. The shower beckoned, but I didn't want to waste time. Instead, I went to the closet Blake had mentioned and found it stocked with women's clothes in various sizes, all expensive labels. I selected a soft cashmere sweater and yoga pants that fit reasonably well, trying not to think too hard about why Blake kept a full wardrobe for female guests. When I emerged from the room, I followed the sound of movement to find Blake in his kitchen, setting out plates. He had changed too, now wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that did nothing to hide his muscular build. Without the formal suit, he looked younger, though no less dangerous. "Food's here," he announced, gesturing to the spread on his dining table. Italian, of course. Pasta, salad, bread, enough for several people. "Eat. You'll need your strength for what comes next." I sat across from Blake at his dining table, pushing pasta around my plate more than eating it. Despite my earlier hunger, my stomach was in knots. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city lights glittering through the massive windows like scattered diamonds. Blake ate with the focused efficiency of someone who viewed food as fuel rather than pleasure, his eyes occasionally flicking to me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You're not eating," he observed, setting down his fork. "I'm trying to process the fact that I just agreed to hide out in a mafia boss's penthouse while he investigates his own brother," I replied, my voice sharper than intended. "Forgive me if my appetite is somewhat affected." A small smile played at Blake's lips. "You have more spine than I expected. Vincent usually goes for the more pliable types, women who don't question, who accept what they're told. Maybe that's why he had to force this marriage," I shot back. "Pliable women smart enough to research the Rossi family probably wouldn't agree to marry into it voluntarily." Blake's smile widened into something that might have been genuine amusement. "Probably not. Tell me about your research. What did you find?" I took a sip of the wine he'd poured, a red that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Not much, honestly. Your family keeps a very clean public profile. Legitimate businesses, charitable donations, no scandal. The closest thing I found to controversy was your father's death 3 years ago, and even that was just speculation about whether it was really a heart attack or something more sinister." Blake's expression went cold, a wall slamming down behind his eyes. "It was a heart attack. Natural causes. My father had been ill for some time, though he tried to hide it." He paused, seeming to debate how much to share. "What else?" "I found that you exist, barely. A few photos from charity events, mentions in business journals. But Vincent is everywhere in the public records. He's the face of Rossi Enterprises, which I now understand is intentional." "Very good," Blake said approvingly. "Vincent loves the spotlight, loves being seen as a successful businessman. It suits our purposes to let him have that visibility while I handle the more delicate aspects of our family's interests. But lately, he's been pushing for more. More power within the organization, more say in our operations. This marriage is part of that push. I'm certain of it." I set down my wine glass with enough force that it clinked against the table. "So what does he want with me?" "I'm nobody special. My family's construction company is small time." What could I possibly offer him? Blake leaned back in his chair, studying me with those calculating gray eyes. That's what I need to find out. But I have theories. Your father's company, despite its size, has contracts with the city, with developers, access to permits, to building projects, to information about urban development. Vincent could use that access for any number of purposes: money laundering through construction projects, securing information about upcoming development deals, creating legitimate fronts for illegitimate operations. The pieces began falling into place in my mind, and I felt sick. My father thought Vincent was helping us out of generosity, but Vincent caused our financial problems in the first place, didn't he? He sabotaged the contracts, drove us into debt deliberately. Most likely, Blake confirmed. It's his style. Create the problem, then offer the solution. The person you're saving always feels grateful, obligated. They don't question your motives too closely. I pushed back from the table, too agitated to sit still. I walked to the windows, pressing my hands against the cool glass, staring out at the city that suddenly felt like a cage. My family has no idea. They think they're making a smart move, securing our future. They don't know they're handing me over to a criminal and giving him control over my father's business. I felt Blake's presence behind me before I heard him move. He was quiet for someone so large, predatory in his grace. They'll never have to know, he said softly. If we handle this correctly, your family's debt will be cleared. Their business will be secure, and you'll be free. Vincent won't be able to touch any of you. I turned to face him, finding him closer than I'd expected. In the dim light from the city, his features looked even sharper, more dangerous. How? How can you promise that? He's your brother. Won't there be consequences for interfering with his plans? There will be consequences, Blake acknowledged, but I'm willing to face them. Vincent has been crossing lines, Brianna. This marriage scheme is just the latest example. He's been conducting unauthorized deals, forming alliances with families that we've traditionally avoided, taking risks that put our entire organization in jeopardy. The council has been patient with him because he's family, because he's my brother. But patience has limits. The council? I asked. The family's ruling body. 5 members, including myself and Vincent. We make decisions collectively about major operations, about territory, about alliances and conflicts. Vincent has been circumventing the council's authority, acting independently. It's created tension. I processed this, my mind racing. So helping me escape this marriage isn't just about doing the right thing. It's about politics. Power. You're using this situation to undermine Vincent's position within your organization. Blake didn't deny it. I told you I had my own reasons, but that doesn't make my promise to protect you any less real. Sometimes the right thing to do aligns with strategic advantage. This is one of those times. I should have felt manipulated, used, and part of me did. But another part, a part I didn't want to examine too closely, was relieved. Blake's political motivations meant he had a vested interest in keeping me safe. Personal honor could be a fragile thing, but self-interest was reliable. What happens now? I asked. Do I just hide here until you figure out Vincent's real plan? For tonight, yes. Tomorrow, I'll start making inquiries. I have people who gather information, who can trace Vincent's recent activities. I'll also need you to tell me everything you can remember about your interactions with Vincent. Every conversation, every meeting, every time he said something that struck you as odd. Details matter. I nodded, exhaustion suddenly crashing over me. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright was fading, leaving me hollow and shaky. I'm tired, I admitted. This has been the longest night of my life. Blake's expression softened slightly, a crack in his dangerous facade. Go to bed. We'll talk more in the morning. I'll be in my office making some calls, arranging things. If you need anything, I'm down the hall, last door on the right. I moved toward the hallway, then paused. Blake? Thank you for helping me, even if it is for your own reasons. I'm grateful. He said nothing, just watched me with those unreadable gray eyes. I fled to the guest room, closing the door behind me and leaning against it as if I could physically block out the complicated, dangerous situation I'd gotten myself into. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay in that enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the events of the night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vincent's cold smile, remembered the fear that had been my constant companion since the engagement announcement. Then I would think of Blake, of the way he'd looked at me in the bar, the intensity of his focus. He was dangerous in a completely different way than Vincent. Vincent's danger was petty, cruel, personal. Blake's danger was vast, controlled, absolutely lethal if provoked. I must have eventually dozed off because I woke with a start to find early morning light filtering through the windows. For a disoriented moment, I didn't know where I was. Then memory crashed back. Blake's penthouse. The confession in the bar. The revelation about the Rossi family. I got up and showered, using the expensive products in the bathroom, trying to wash away the feeling of being trapped in a situation spiraling beyond my control. When I emerged, dressed in clothes from the mysterious guest closet, I found Blake in the kitchen making coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, dark circles under his eyes, but otherwise alert and focused. "Morning," he said, pouring me a cup without asking. "We need to talk." That ominous phrase sent anxiety skittering down my spine. "What did you find out?" Blake gestured for me to sit at the kitchen island. He remained standing, his body language tense. "I made some calls last night, spoke to people I trust. Vincent has been busy. In the last 6 months, he's been meeting regularly with the Castellano family, specifically with Marco Castellano. Do you know who that is?" I shook my head. Should I? The Castellanos are our competitors, for lack of a better word. They control territory in New Jersey and parts of Brooklyn. We have an uneasy truce with them, established by my father before he died. Vincent meeting with them without authorization is a serious breach of protocol. "What kind of meetings?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "That's what I'm still trying to determine, but I have theories, and this is where your marriage comes in. Brianna, your father's construction company has been working on a major development project in Red Hook, a mixed-use complex, residential, commercial, with significant waterfront access. Do you know about this?" I frowned, trying to remember. Vaguely. Dad mentioned it months ago, said it was the biggest contract his company had ever landed. He was excited about it. Blake's jaw tightened. That property is in disputed territory. The Castellanos claim it falls under their influence, but technically, it's in an area we control. If Vincent is using your father's company as a vehicle to partner with the Castellanos on this development, he's essentially handing them a foothold in our territory. In exchange, I'm guessing, for their support in challenging my leadership. The implications made my head spin. So this marriage, my family's debt, all of it was just to gain control of my father's business, to use it as some kind of peace offering to your rivals. "More than that," Blake said grimly. "Marriage creates legal complications. As Vincent's wife, you would have certain rights, certain access to family information and resources. If something were to happen to Vincent, you'd be entitled to his portion of the business. And if something were to happen to me..." He left the sentence unfinished, but the meaning was clear. "Vincent is planning to kill you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He's going to use the Castellano alliance to stage some kind of coup, take over the family, and he wants me married to him for legitimacy, to show that he has normal, stable relationships, To inherit your position without the council questioning his right. That's my working theory, Blake confirmed, though the details are still unclear. Vincent is smart enough to cover his tracks. But the pattern is there. And now that I know what he's planning, I can prepare. I set down my coffee cup, my hands trembling. Blake, if this is true, if Vincent is really planning something this big, you can't just help me escape the marriage. He'll know you interfered. He'll know you suspect him. You'll be in danger. Something shifted in Blake's expression, a flash of an emotion I couldn't quite identify. I'm always in danger, Brianna. It comes with the position. But you're right that we need to be careful, which is why I've decided to accelerate our timeline. Accelerate? What does that mean? Blake moved around the island, standing directly in front of me. It means we can't wait to slowly unravel Vincent's plan. We need to act decisively now before the wedding. I'm calling an emergency council meeting for tomorrow night. I'll present evidence of Vincent's unauthorized dealings with the Castellanos, his manipulation of your family's situation, his attempts to circumvent family authority. The council will have to act. My breath caught. And what happens to me during all this? If Vincent finds out I'm here, if he realizes I went to you. Blake's hands came up to frame my face, his touch surprisingly gentle. He won't touch you. I promise you that. But we need to keep you hidden for the next 48 hours. After the council meeting, after Vincent's been dealt with, you'll be free. Your family's debt will be cleared through legitimate channels. Your father's company will be protected. And Vincent won't be in a position to threaten any of you ever again. Dealt with, I repeated. What does that mean exactly? What will the council do to him? Blake's eyes went cold. That depends on what the council decides. At minimum, Vincent will be stripped of his authority within the family, possibly exiled. At worst. He didn't finish, but I could fill in the blanks. You're talking about killing your own brother, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm talking about protecting the family from someone who's proven he can't be trusted, who's willing to betray us to our enemies for personal gain. Vincent made his choices, Brianna. Now he has to face the consequences. I pulled away from his touch, needing distance to think. This was so far beyond what I'd imagined when I walked into that bar last night. I'd been looking for an escape from an unwanted marriage, not to become the catalyst for a mafia power struggle that might end in fratricide. Maybe I should just marry him, I heard myself say. Maybe that's safer for everyone. My family stays protected, Vincent gets what he wants, and you don't have to go to war with your own brother. Blake crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders. No, that is not an option. You marry Vincent. You become a prisoner. He'll use you, control you, possibly hurt you once he has what he needs from your father's company. And you'll be trapped because divorce isn't something the Rossi family accepts easily. Is that what you want? To spend the rest of your life with a man who terrifies you? No, I admitted, tears burning my eyes. But I don't want anyone to die because of me either. I don't want blood on my hands. Blake's grip softened, his thumbs rubbing circles on my shoulders. This isn't about you, not really. Vincent has been building toward this confrontation for years. You're just the excuse I needed to finally act. If it wasn't you, it would be something else. Another betrayal, another unauthorized deal, another risk to the family. This was inevitable. I looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous man who had swept into my life and turned everything upside down. Why do you care? Really? You could let Vincent have his way. Let him dig his own grave. Why risk a confrontation now? Blake's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before being buried again. Because my father asked me to protect this family before he died. He knew Vincent was ambitious. knew he lacked the discipline and patience for leadership. But he was still our blood. So my father wanted me to try to guide him, to keep him in check. I've tried, Brianna. For 3 years. I've tried. But Vincent doesn't want guidance. He wants power, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. He released my shoulders and stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. And if I'm being honest, there's another reason. When I saw you in that bar last night, desperate and scared, begging for help, something in me responded. Maybe it's because I know what it's like to be trapped by family obligations. Maybe it's because I see in you a strength that Vincent would crush. Or maybe... He paused, his gray eyes locking with mine. Maybe it's because the moment you looked at me, really looked at me, I knew I couldn't let my brother have you. The air between us suddenly felt charged, electric. I should have been thinking about escape plans and family obligations and the very real danger I was in. Instead, all I could focus on was the intensity in Blake's eyes, the implication in his words. Blake, I started, not sure what I was going to say. He shook his head, cutting me off. Don't. Not now. Right now, we focus on keeping you safe and dealing with Vincent. Everything else can wait. But the way he looked at me suggested that everything else was very much on his mind too. A phone buzzed, breaking the tension. Blake pulled it from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read the message. Vincent is looking for you. Your cousin Sophia called him this morning, worried because you never came back to your apartment last night. He's been calling your phone. Panic flooded through me. My phone. It's in my purse. I left it at the bar, I think. Or maybe in the car. I have it, Blake said calmly. I grabbed it before we left the bar. It's been turned off since then. But we need to respond somehow, or Vincent will escalate. He'll go to your family, start making threats. What do I say? I asked, my mind racing. Blake thought for a moment. Text Sophia. Tell her you met someone last night, went home with them. Didn't mean to worry her. Say you're embarrassed and need some space. Ask her not to tell Vincent yet because you're not ready to face him. She won't believe that, I protested. Sophia knows I would never do something like that. She'll believe that alcohol and stress made you do something out of character, Blake countered. It's plausible enough to buy us time. Do it now, before Vincent gets more suspicious. He retrieved my phone from somewhere and handed it to me. I powered it on, my heart pounding as messages flooded in. Texts from Sophia, from my mother, from Vincent himself. I ignored all of them except Sophia's, and typed out the message Blake suggested, my fingers shaking. Sent, I said, showing him the screen. Good. Now turn it off again. We can't risk Vincent tracking your location. Blake took the phone back. For the next 2 days, you stay here. Don't go near the windows where someone could see you from another building. Don't answer the door. I'll have food and anything else you need brought up. Can you do that? I nodded, feeling like a prisoner even though Blake insisted I was a guest. And you? What will you be doing? Preparing for the council meeting, gathering evidence, securing support from the other members, making sure when I present Vincent's betrayals, there's no doubt about what needs to be done. He moved toward the hallway, clearly intending to get started immediately. Blake, I called after him. He stopped, turning back. What if the council doesn't side with you? What if they choose Vincent? His smile was cold, predatory. They won't. I've been preparing for this possibility since my father died. Vincent thinks he's been clever, building his alliances in secret. But I've known about most of his moves all along. I've just been waiting for him to go far enough that the council would have no choice but to act. Your situation gave me the final piece I needed. After he left, I stood in that enormous kitchen, surrounded by luxury and danger in equal measure. I had less than 48 hours until the council meeting that would decide Vincent's fate. 48 hours trapped in this penthouse with Blake, the man who had promised to save me, but who carried his own darkness, his own capacity for violence. I thought about my family, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. I thought about Vincent, who had orchestrated my family's downfall just to trap me in a marriage for his own political gain. And I thought about Blake, complicated and dangerous, who looked at me like I was something precious, even as he planned to destroy his own brother. I had wanted to escape my fate. Instead, I jumped from one dangerous situation into another. The only difference was that this time, I'd chosen it. That had to count for something. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I spent the first day exploring Blake's penthouse like a caged animal pacing its boundaries, careful to stay away from the windows as instructed. The apartment was a study in controlled luxury. Expensive but not ostentatious, comfortable but not warm. Everything was chosen with purpose, nothing left to chance. It reminded me of Blake himself. I found his library, a room I hadn't noticed the night before. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books, an eclectic mix of classical literature, history, philosophy, and surprisingly, poetry. I pulled out a worn copy of Dante's Inferno, finding notes in the margins written in Blake's precise handwriting. The man who ran a criminal empire spent his free time reading about hell. The irony wasn't lost on me. Blake himself was largely absent that first day. He would appear briefly to check on me, to bring food or make sure I had everything I needed, then disappear again into his office. I could hear him sometimes through the walls, speaking in rapid Italian on the phone, his voice hard and commanding. This was the real Blake, I realized. The mafia boss, not the man who had looked at me with something like tenderness that morning. By the evening of the first day, I was climbing the walls with anxiety and boredom. I had texted Sophia again, maintaining the fiction that I was with someone new, buying us more time. But I knew that excuse wouldn't hold much longer. Vincent would demand to see me soon, and when I didn't appear, he would start making threats. I was staring at my phone, debating whether to risk calling my mother just to hear her voice, when Blake appeared in the doorway of the library. He looked exhausted, his shirt rumpled, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. But his eyes lit up slightly when he saw me curled up in his reading chair. "Finding everything you need?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Your book collection is surprisingly literary for a crime boss," I replied, holding up the Dante. A small smile played at his lips. My father believed that a man who only understands violence is a dangerous fool. He made sure Vincent and I had a classical education: Latin, Italian, literature, philosophy. He wanted us to understand power in all its forms, not just the barrel of a gun. "And did Vincent appreciate these lessons?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Vincent learned what he needed to get our father's approval, then forgot most of it the moment the old man died. He has no patience for nuance, for history, for anything that doesn't immediately serve his ambitions. Blake pushed off from the doorframe and walked into the library, pouring himself a drink from the bar cart in the corner. "Whiskey." I shook my head. I need to keep my wits about me. "Wise," Blake acknowledged. He settled into the chair across from mine, his long legs stretched out. For a moment, he just looked at me, and I felt that electric awareness again, the pull that had been simmering between us since the bar. "How are the preparations going?" I asked, trying to focus on the practical rather than the way his eyes seemed to darken when he looked at me. "The council meeting is set for tomorrow night. I've presented the preliminary evidence to 2 of the council members, Marcus and Giuseppe. They're old guard, loyal to my father's memory. They're disturbed by what I've shown them about Vincent's activities. The other 2 members will be harder to convince, but I'm confident. Confident that they'll what? Strip Vincent of his position? Exile him? I couldn't bring myself to say the other possibility. Blake took a long sip of his whiskey. The council will do what's necessary to protect the family. Vincent's alliance with the Castellanos is treasonous by our standards. The fact that he was willing to manipulate and force an innocent woman into marriage for his schemes only makes it worse. But there's another complication. What complication? Dread pooled in my stomach. Vincent has accelerated his timeline. He must suspect something because he's pushing to move the wedding up. Instead of 3 days from when you disappeared, he wants it to happen tomorrow afternoon. He's telling your family it's because he can't wait any longer, that he's too in love to follow the original plan. I felt the blood drain from my face. Tomorrow? But the council meeting isn't until tomorrow night. If he marries me before then. It complicates everything, Blake finished grimly. As your husband, Vincent would have certain legal protections, certain rights. It would be much harder to move against him. Which is exactly why he's doing this. He knows I'm on to him. How could he know? We've been so careful. Blake's expression darkened. I have my suspicions. One of my people may have talked, or Vincent has better intelligence than I gave him credit for. Either way, we need to adjust our plans. I stood up, too agitated to sit still. What does that mean? What are you going to do? Blake rose as well, setting down his glass. I'm going to make sure you don't marry my brother, whatever it takes. Blake, you can't just kidnap me. Vincent will know it was you. He'll use it against you with the council. Let him try, Blake said, his voice cold. I've been playing by the rules, Brianna. Being patient, trying to build an airtight case. But if Vincent wants to force the issue, then I'll force it right back. The council meeting happens tomorrow night as planned. But you won't be at that wedding tomorrow afternoon because you'll be here, with me, where Vincent can't touch you. And my family? What happens when I don't show up? Vincent will blame them. He'll hurt them. My voice rose with panic. Blake crossed the distance between us, his hands gripping my arms. I've already taken steps to protect your family. I have people watching your parents' house, your sister's dorm, your father's business. Vincent won't be able to get to them without my knowing. And after tomorrow night, after the council strips him of his power, he won't be a threat to anyone. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that Blake had everything under control, that his plans would work. But I also knew how dangerous Vincent could be, how cunning. What if something goes wrong? What if Vincent doesn't go to the council meeting? What if he just takes his Castellano allies and comes after you directly? Then I'll handle it, Blake said simply, as if discussing a minor business inconvenience rather than a potential war. You could die, I said, my voice breaking. Vincent could kill you, and it would be my fault. I should never have gone to that bar. I should never have told you about the marriage. I should have just... Blake's mouth crashed down on mine, cutting off my spiral of self-recrimination. For a shocked moment, I froze, my mind unable to process what was happening. Then my body took over, responding to the heat and intensity of his kiss with a hunger I didn't know I possessed. His hands moved from my arms to my waist, pulling me flush against him. I wound my fingers into his hair, that thick, dark hair I'd been wanting to touch since I first saw him. The kiss was nothing like the chaste, obligatory kisses Vincent had given me during our engagement. This was consuming, demanding, a claiming that made my knees weak. Blake walked me backward until my back hit the bookshelf, his body pinning me in place. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and devastating effectiveness. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, my lips swollen, his eyes almost black with desire. This is a terrible idea, I gasped, even as my hands fisted in his shirt, keeping him close. The worst, Blake agreed, his forehead resting against mine. You're my brother's fiancée, You're under my protection. I should be keeping you at a professional distance. His thumb traced my bottom lip. But I stopped being professional the moment I saw you in that bar, looking like you were drowning and needed someone to save you. I don't need saving, I protested weakly, though my body was betraying me, arching into his touch. I know, Blake said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. That's what makes you dangerous. You're not a victim, Brianna. You're a fighter who was temporarily backed into a corner. That strength, that fire, it calls to something in me. His mouth found mine again, slower this time, but no less intense. I knew I should push him away, should maintain some distance until this situation with Vincent was resolved. But I'd spent months being afraid, being controlled, being forced into a future I didn't want. Kissing Blake felt like rebellion, like reclaiming some piece of myself that Vincent had tried to steal. When we finally broke apart again, reality crashed back in. Blake, we can't. Not like this. Not while everything is so uncertain. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair in that gesture of frustration I was coming to recognize. You're right. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate, given the circumstances. Don't apologize, I said quickly. I kissed you back. I wanted it. But we need to focus on surviving the next 24 hours. After that, if we're both still alive and Vincent is no longer a threat, then maybe. Maybe, Blake echoed, his gray eyes holding mine with an intensity that made promises he wasn't voicing. The spell was broken by Blake's phone buzzing. He pulled it out, his expression hardening as he read the message. Vincent is at your parents' house. He's demanding to know where you are. Your mother is trying to stall him, but he's getting aggressive. Fear spiked through me. We have to do something. He'll hurt her. He won't, Blake said with absolute certainty. My people are there. If Vincent so much as raises his voice too high, they'll intervene. But I think it's time to play our hand. I'm going to call Vincent directly. Let him know you're under my protection. That will start a war, I said. The war started the moment Vincent decided to betray the family, Blake countered. Now we're just making it official. He dialed, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. Vincent answered on the second ring. Blake, to what do I owe the unexpected pleasure? We need to talk, little brother, about your fiancé. There was a pause, and I could almost hear Vincent's mind working. What about Brianna? Do you know where she is? Her family is very worried. She's safe, Blake said. She's with me, and she's not marrying you tomorrow or any other day. Vincent's laugh was cold. Is that so? And why would my bride be with you, Blake? What exactly have you been doing with my woman? The possessive way he said my woman made my skin crawl. Blake's jaw clenched, but his voice remained calm. Brianna came to me for help. She told me about the marriage you forced on her, about how you manipulated her family situation to trap her. She also told me some interesting things about your business activities that the council might find very enlightening. I see, Vincent said, his tone going dangerous. So my dear brother has been playing White Knight. How noble. But I wonder if Brianna knows what kind of man she's run to. Did you tell her about the blood on your hands, Blake? Did you tell her about the people you've killed? The families you've destroyed? At least with me, she knew what she was getting. She knows enough, Blake replied. And she's made her choice. The engagement is off, Vincent. Your scheme to use her father's company as a bridge to the Castellanos is over. Tomorrow night, you'll answer to the council for your unauthorized dealings. Vincent's laugh turned genuinely amused. Oh, Blake, you always were too confident in your position. You think the council will side with you over me? You think they'll believe the word of some desperate girl over their own blood? I've been building my support for months. You're not as secure as you believe. We'll see, Blake said. In the meantime, stay away from the Hayes family. If you go near them again, If you so much as send them a threatening message, I'll consider it an act of war. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Vincent said, but there was a threat in his voice. "But Blake? You should ask yourself why Brianna is really with you. Is it because she wants your protection, or because she's looking for a better deal? After all, why settle for the younger brother when she can have the boss himself? Think about that while you're playing hero." The call disconnected. I stared at the phone, Vincent's insinuations hanging in the air between us. Blake's expression was unreadable. "He's trying to manipulate you," I said quickly, "to make you doubt my motives. Blake, I didn't come to you looking for a better option or a more powerful protector. I came to you because I was desperate, and you were there." "I know," Blake said, but something had shifted in his demeanor. He'd pulled back behind his walls, the moment of vulnerability from our kiss erased. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. The council meeting is at 9. Until then, stay here. Stay hidden. I have preparations to make." He left before I could say anything else, and I was alone in the library, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my heart racing with fear about what tomorrow would bring. Vincent's words echoed in my mind, poisonous seeds designed to create doubt. But beneath the fear was something else: determination. I had started this by refusing to be a victim. I wouldn't back down now. That night I barely slept. I lay in the guest bed, listening to the sounds of the city, thinking about Blake somewhere else in the apartment, thinking about Vincent and the wedding that was supposed to happen tomorrow, thinking about my family and how they must be terrified, confused by my disappearance, thinking about the council meeting that would decide all of our fates. Sometime in the early morning hours, I gave up on sleep and went to find Blake. I discovered him in his office, surrounded by papers and files, his laptop open to what looked like financial records. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" I countered, moving into the room. "Sleep is a luxury I can't afford right now," Blake said. He gestured to the papers spread across his desk. "I'm documenting everything for the council. Every unauthorized transaction, every meeting with the Castellanos, every piece of evidence that Vincent has been planning to betray the family. It needs to be airtight." I came around the desk to look at the documents. Financial transfers, phone records, surveillance photos. Blake had been collecting evidence for months, maybe years. This confrontation had been building long before I entered the picture. "You would have done this eventually," I said. "Even without me. Even if Vincent hadn't tried to force this marriage." "Probably," Blake admitted. "But you gave me the final push I needed. The courage to actually act instead of just watching and waiting." I reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm grateful. Not just for protecting me, but for seeing me as a person, not a pawn. Vincent never did that." Blake stood, pulling me closer. "Brianna, after tomorrow, after this is all over, I want to do this right. Court you properly, give you the choice to be with me or not, without any of this pressure or danger." "And if I choose not?" I asked, though my heart was already giving him the answer. "Then I let you go," Blake said simply. "No strings, no obligations. You and your family will be safe and free regardless. I need you to know that. My protection isn't conditional on anything." I rose on my tiptoes and kissed him, soft and sweet, a promise for the future if we survive to see it. "Let's get through tomorrow first. Then we can talk about what comes next." Tomorrow came too fast. I woke to find Blake already gone. A note on the kitchen counter saying he had an early meeting with council members Giuseppe and Marcus to finalize strategy. The apartment felt emptier without him, more like a cage than ever. Outside the windows, the city went about its business, unaware that today would determine my fate and possibly spark a war within the Rossi family. I forced myself to eat breakfast, though everything tasted like cardboard. My phone, which Blake had allowed me to turn on briefly to check messages, was flooded with increasingly frantic texts from my family. My mother begging me to call her. My sister confused and worried. My father demanding to know what was happening. And Vincent, his messages evolving from concern to angry, to coldly threatening as the hours passed. Brianna, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Your family needs you to do the right thing. Don't make me take steps I'd rather avoid. I showed Blake the message when he returned mid-morning. His expression grim. He'd been up all night, I could tell, but there was a sharp focus in his eyes, a predatory readiness. He's desperate, Blake said, reading Vincent's threat. Good. Desperate men make mistakes. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me in a protective embrace that felt both comforting and possessive. In 6 hours, this will all be over. The council meets at 9. By midnight, Vincent will no longer be a threat to you or anyone else. What will they do to him? I asked against his chest, breathing in his scent. That depends on what the council decides. Exile is the most likely outcome. Possibly imprisonment in one of our secure facilities until he can be trusted not to retaliate. Blake's voice hardened. Or if they determine his betrayal warrants a more permanent solution, then that. Death. He meant death. I should have been horrified, but all I felt was a numb acceptance. Vincent had orchestrated my family's ruin, forced me into an engagement, and planned to use me as a pawn in his bid for power. Whatever happened to him now, he'd brought on himself. I want to be there, I said suddenly, pulling back to look at Blake. At the council meeting. I want to face Vincent myself, tell them what he did to my family. Blake shook his head immediately. Too dangerous. Vincent will have supporters there, people loyal to him. I can't guarantee your safety. Then don't, I said firmly. I'm tired of hiding, Blake, tired of being protected like I'm fragile. Vincent made me a part of this when he destroyed my family's business and forced that engagement. I have a right to face him. Blake studied me for a long moment, his gray eyes searching mine. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right, but you stay by my side the entire time, and if things get violent, you do exactly what I say. Agreed? Agreed. The hours until the meeting crawled by in agonizing slowness. Blake made me eat lunch, made me rest, made me promise again that I would follow his lead at the council meeting. As evening approached, he laid out clothes for me. A simple black dress that was elegant but not provocative, low heels I could run in if necessary. When I emerged dressed, Blake was in a perfectly tailored suit, looking every inch the mafia boss he was. You look beautiful, he said, his voice rough. And brave. Whatever happens tonight, Brianna, I want you to know that meeting you changed something in me. Reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for beyond power and territory. I crossed to him and straightened his tie, a domestic gesture that felt surreal given the circumstances. Win tonight, Blake. Protect your family. Protect mine. Then we'll figure out what comes next for us. He kissed me, deep and claiming, a promise, and a goodbye just in case. Then we left the penthouse together, heading toward a confrontation that had been building for years. The council meeting was held in a private dining room of an Italian restaurant in Little Italy, a place that had been Rossi family territory for 3 generations. Blake's driver dropped us at a back entrance, and we were escorted through the kitchen by men with cold eyes and visible weapons. The restaurant had been closed for the evening, the only people inside those connected to the family. The council room was dominated by a long table where 5 chairs sat. Blake led me to his seat at the head of the table, positioning me slightly behind him. The other council members were already arriving. Giuseppe, an elderly man with sharp eyes who'd known Blake's father. Marcus, younger but with a brutal scar across his face. Elena, the only woman on the council, beautiful and dangerous. And Salvatore, who looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room. And then Vincent arrived. My ex-fiancé looked immaculate in a gray suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile charming as he greeted the council members. But when his eyes found me standing behind Blake, his expression turned to ice. "Brianna," he said, his voice dripping false concern. "Thank God you're safe. When you disappeared, I was so worried. Your family has been beside themselves." "She's exactly where she needs to be," Blake said before I could respond, his voice hard. "Under my protection, away from your manipulation." Vincent's smile turned sharp. "Is that what she told you? That she needs protection from me?" "Brother, I think you've been deceived. Brianna and I had a small disagreement before the wedding. Pre-wedding jitters, nothing more. She ran to you to make me jealous, and you fell for it." "Liar," I said, stepping forward, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You destroyed my family's business deliberately to force me into marrying you. You manipulated my father's contracts, created the debt that trapped us. This was never about love or even desire. It was about using my father's company as a bridge to the Castellanos." Vincent's mask slipped for just a moment, rage flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. "Wild accusations. You have no proof." "I have all the proof we need," Blake said, spreading documents across the council table. Financial records showing Vincent's manipulation of Hayes Construction's contracts, photos of his unauthorized meetings with Marco Castellano, testimony from our own people about Vincent's plans to cede Red Hook territory in exchange for Castellano support in challenging my leadership. The council members leaned forward, examining the evidence with grave expressions. Giuseppe's face darkened with anger. Marcus's scar seemed to whiten against his skin. Only Salvatore looked uncomfortable, and I suddenly understood. He was Vincent's ally on the council. "This is a coup," Vincent said, his voice rising. "Blake has been planning to remove me for years, and now he's using this girl as an excuse. Everything I've done has been for the family's benefit. The Castellano alliance would have expanded our territory, increased our profits." "At what cost?" Blake demanded, "giving them a foothold in our core territory? Marrying a woman you deliberately trapped to legitimize your plans? Conducting deals without council approval? You've violated every principle our father established." "Our father," Vincent spat, "who gave you everything while I had to fight for scraps. You inherited his position, his respect, his power. All I wanted was a chance to prove myself, to show I could lead just as well as the precious heir." The raw bitterness in his voice made everything clear. This wasn't about business or territory. It was about two brothers and decades of rivalry and resentment that had finally exploded into something that couldn't be contained. Giuseppe stood, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We've heard enough. Vincent Rossi, you are charged with conducting unauthorized business with rival families, manipulating civilians for personal gain, and planning to betray family territory. How do you plead?" Vincent's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "I did what needed to be done. Blake has been too cautious, too soft. The family needs a leader who isn't afraid to take risks." "You're not charged with being ambitious," Elena said coldly. "You're charged with betrayal. Answer the question. Guilty or not guilty?" Vincent's eyes swept the room, landing on Salvatore, who wouldn't meet his gaze. He'd lost, and he knew it. If doing what was necessary for this family's survival is betrayal, then yes, I'm guilty. Blake stood. "The council will vote, all in favor of stripping Vincent of his position and authority within the family." Giuseppe voted yes immediately. Marcus followed. Elena's yes was decisive. Salvatore hesitated, then slowly raised his hand. Vincent had no support left. "The vote is unanimous," Blake said. "Vincent, you are hereby removed from all positions within the Rossi family business. You will be escorted to a secure facility where you will remain until we determine you're no longer a threat. Your assets are frozen, your contacts severed. Do you have anything to say?" Vincent looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw beneath the rage to something more dangerous. Obsession. "You were supposed to be mine, Brianna. Everything I did to have you. And now my brother gets what I wanted. Always. Every time." "I was never yours," I said firmly. "I was never anyone's to be taken or owned. That was your first mistake." Vincent lunged across the table toward me, but Blake moved faster. His fist connected with Vincent's jaw with a sickening crack, sending his brother sprawling. Security guards materialized from the shadows, hauling Vincent to his feet. "Take him," Blake ordered. As they dragged Vincent away, still struggling, he screamed threats and curses that echoed through the restaurant. When the doors finally closed behind him, silence fell over the council room. Giuseppe approached Blake, clasping his shoulder. "Your father would be proud. You did what had to be done." Blake nodded, his expression unreadable. "What about the Castellanos? They'll retaliate for losing their inside connection." "Let them try," Marcus growled. "We'll remind them why the Rossis have held this territory for 3 generations." The council members filed out, leaving Blake and me alone in the room. I could see the weight of what he'd done settling on him. He'd just destroyed his own brother, however necessary it had been. "Blake," I said softly, taking his hand. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "It's over. You're free. Your family is free. Vincent can never hurt any of you again." "What about you?" I asked. "Are you free?" He pulled back to look at me, his gray eyes haunted but clear. "As free as a man in my position can be. But for the first time in years, I don't feel the weight of my brother's betrayal hanging over me. I did what needed to be done." We left the restaurant together, stepping out into the New York night. Blake's driver was waiting, but I hesitated before getting in the car. "What happens now?" "To us, I mean?" Blake cupped my face in his hands. "Now I court you properly. No danger, no forced circumstances. Just you and me, if that's what you want. You're free to choose, Brianna. Stay with me or walk away. Either way, you and your family are protected. The debt is cleared. Your father's business is secure." I thought about everything that had happened since I walked into that bar 3 days ago. The fear, the danger, the impossible choices. But I also thought about Blake. The way he'd protected me, believed in me, seen me as a partner rather than a possession. The way his kiss made me feel alive after months of feeling trapped. "I choose you," I said simply. "Not because I need protection, or because I'm grateful. I choose you because you showed me I was worth fighting for. And because when I'm with you, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm powerful." Blake's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He kissed me there on the street, with his world watching, claiming me publicly in a way that left no doubt. When we finally broke apart, he whispered against my lips, "Then let's go home. Our home. Together." 3 months later, I stood in Blake's penthouse, our penthouse now, watching snow fall over Manhattan. So much had changed since that desperate night in the bar when I'd begged a stranger to save me from a forced marriage. I'd saved myself, really, with Blake as my ally rather than my rescuer. My family's debt had been cleared through Blake's legitimate business channels. My father's company not only restored, but thriving with new contracts that Blake helped secure. My parents knew I was with Blake Rossi, Vincent's brother, but they didn't know the full truth about the family business. They thought Blake was just a successful businessman who'd fallen for me. It was simpler that way, safer for them. Vincent remained in a secure facility, supposedly a private rehabilitation center for his breakdown. The truth was more complicated. He was essentially under house arrest, contained until the family could trust he wouldn't retaliate. Blake visited him sometimes, though he never told me what they discussed. I didn't ask. Some wounds were too deep for an outsider to understand. The Castellano situation had been resolved through a combination of strategic negotiations and a show of force that reminded them why the Rossis weren't to be challenged. Marco Castellano had lost face when his inside connection was removed, and he'd backed down rather than face a war he couldn't win. As for me, I'd transformed from a desperate girl into something else entirely. Blake didn't just protect me. He educated me about his world, taught me how the family business worked, introduced me to the legitimate and less legitimate sides of his empire. I learned to read financial statements that hid money laundering operations. I sat in on meetings where territory disputes were resolved. I became Blake's partner in ways that went far beyond romance. "You're thinking too hard," Blake said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. I can practically hear the wheels turning. I leaned back against him, feeling safe and powerful in equal measure. I was thinking about how different my life is now. 3 months ago, I was terrified and trapped. Now What exactly am I, Blake? He turned me in his arms to face him. "You're my partner, my equal, the woman I love." His gray eyes held mine intensely. "You're also becoming something the family hasn't seen in generations. A woman with real power and influence. The council members respect you. Even Giuseppe, who's old school about women in the business, listens when you speak." It was true. I'd found my place in Blake's world not by pretending to be something I wasn't, but by being exactly who I was. Smart, strategic, unafraid to challenge assumptions. Blake valued my insights precisely because I came from outside the mafia culture, because I saw solutions that lifelong mobsters missed. "Your father would never have imagined a woman at the council table," I said. "My father was a man of his time," Blake replied. "But times change. The family needs to evolve or die. You're part of that evolution, Brianna. You're helping me transform what the Rossis are into what they need to become." There was a knock at the door, and one of Blake's men entered. "Boss, the meeting is ready. Everyone's waiting." Blake nodded, then looked at me. "Are you ready for this?" Today was significant. The first council meeting where I would formally present a proposal, a plan to expand the family's legitimate real estate holdings, while gradually reducing dependence on illegal operations. It was ambitious, risky, and exactly the kind of long-term thinking Blake needed to secure the family's future. "I'm ready," I said. We walked into the council room together, equal partners. Giuseppe, Marcus, and Elena were already seated, their expressions ranging from curious to approving. Salvatore had been removed from the council after his divided loyalties became clear, replaced by a younger member, Antonio, who embraced Blake's vision for modernizing operations. I presented my proposal with confidence, outlining how legitimate businesses could eventually outpace illegal revenue streams, making the family less vulnerable to law enforcement while maintaining their power and influence. It was a 10-year plan, ambitious but achievable. When I finished, Giuseppe was the first to speak. "Your woman has vision, Blake. She's right that we need to think beyond the old ways. I vote yes on this proposal." One by one, the others agreed. Blake's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently in pride and support. After the meeting, as we walked back to the penthouse through a city that was both dangerous and ours, Blake pulled me into an empty side street. "Marry me," he said suddenly. I blinked, surprised, despite the fact that we'd been growing closer every day. "Is this about legitimizing my position in the family?" "This is about the fact that I love you," Blake said firmly. "About the fact that you walked into my life desperate and scared, and you transformed not just your own fate, but mine too. You made me believe the family could be something more than what it was. You made me better, Brianna. I want you as my wife, my partner in everything, not because tradition demands it, but because I choose you. Every day, I choose you." Tears pricked my eyes. 3 months ago, the word marriage had represented a prison. Now, with Blake, It represented freedom. The freedom to be myself completely, to be powerful and vulnerable, to love and be loved without fear. Yes, I said, on one condition. Blake raised an eyebrow. What condition? I'm not just marrying Blake Rossi, the mob boss. I'm marrying Blake Rossi, the man who reads Dante and believes in evolution over tradition. The man who saw me as strong when everyone else saw me as a victim. Promise me that man will always exist, even when the darkness of this life tries to consume him. Blake pulled me close, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both tender and claiming. I promise. You're my light in that darkness, Brianna. You always will be. As we walked home through the snowy streets of Manhattan, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. I'd begged a stranger to save me from a forced marriage, never knowing I was seducing the most dangerous man in the city. But Blake hadn't saved me. Instead, he'd given me the tools and support to save myself, to transform from victim to victor. Vincent was right about one thing. I had chosen the boss over him, but not for the reasons he'd assumed. I'd chosen Blake because he saw me as an equal, because he challenged me to be stronger, because he loved me without trying to own me. The penthouse was warm when we arrived, lights glowing against the darkness. Our home, our territory, our life together, built not on force or obligation, but on choice and mutual respect. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, as we stood by the window, looking out at our city. "I'm thinking that 3 months ago I was begging to be saved from a marriage," I said, turning to face him. "And now I'm choosing a marriage that will make me a queen instead of a prisoner. That's one hell of a transformation." Blake laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Queen of the Rossi Empire. It has a certain ring to it." "Co-ruler," I corrected. "We do this together, Blake. Equal partners transforming a criminal empire into something that can survive in the modern world. It won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," Blake replied, pulling me close. "But if anyone can help me navigate the impossible, it's you." The woman who had the courage to ask a stranger for help, who turned a desperate situation into an opportunity, who looked at a mob boss and saw not just danger but potential. As the snow fell over Manhattan, covering the city in pristine white, I kissed my future husband and thought about the future we would build together. Not the future Vincent had tried to force on me, but one I'd chosen for myself. A future where I wasn't just Mrs. Blake Rossi, mob wife and trophy. I was Brianna Hayes Rossi, strategist, partner, and architect of the family's transformation. I'd begged a stranger to save me from marriage to a monster. Instead, I'd found a partner who helped me become the woman I was always meant to be. Powerful, respected, and finally, truly free. The wedding would happen in spring, a private ceremony with only family. And after that, the real work would begin, transforming the Rossi family empire from within, modernizing their operations, securing their future. It was ambitious, maybe impossible. But as Blake's arms tightened around me, and I looked out at the city we would rule together, I knew we could do it. After all, I'd survived Vincent's manipulation, helped bring down his coup, and earned the respect of one of New York's most dangerous families. If I could do all that in 3 months, imagine what I could accomplish in a lifetime.